Moscow, this is RT with you 24 hours a day, and our top story, the vote that's affecting every nation on earth, the US presidential election. With voting stations now open across America, voters are flocking to decide on their president, despite a torrent of reports about irregularities. From the superstorm-wrecked Northeast experiencing trouble with polling stations to allegations of partisan voter suppression and even ballot tampering elsewhere. Let's now go to our correspondents in the States for more on the vote so far. And Ghana, in Washington, let's hear from you first. How is the voting going? Bring us up to speed.
Well, Bill, for now, it's all Ohio, Ohio, Ohio. The media here call it the ground zero of this election. Right now, the president is holding a small edge, a small advantage there, as well as in other swing states like Nevada, Iowa, and Wisconsin. Not in Florida, though. Romney might have the edge there. But again, no solid numbers yet. At least 4 hours to go before we could say anything more definitive. Our international viewers might ask, why is it all about that handful of swing states? What about the rest of the country? The fact of the matter is that not all votes are equal in the U.S. In the electoral college system, some votes are never counted. It's a winner-take-all system where if a candidate loses a state, they get 0 electoral votes from that state. Doesn't matter how many people voted for them in that state. This morning I was chatting with random folks at a coffee shop. There was a young man, a Democrat from Texas, who voted for President Obama by mail. He requested an absentee ballot. He went through all that paperwork, knowing perfectly well that his vote would not be counted because the state of Texas is a solid red state that is Republican, so Democrat votes there don't count at all in the Electoral College. President Obama will get 0 electoral votes from Texas. Then I was chatting with another young man in a similar situation. He was telling me how much he would want his vote to actually count. And I hear that more and more, that frustration for more and more people about it is a problem for those who think democratic process is when all votes are equal and counted.
Thanks very much, Ghana. Let's cross now over to New York. And Marina, we've been hearing all about the problems there in the Northeast. Are they ongoing?
Bill, they certainly are ongoing. As a matter of fact, I just returned from a polling location where it took quite a while and lots of confusion before I myself was able to cast a ballot. Now, the reason there is so much chaos taking place in many polling locations in New York and nearby states is because Hurricane Sandy caused a significant amount of damage and wiped out more than 200 polling locations in New York State and more than 200 polling locations in nearby New Jersey. As a result of that, the polling locations in New York are being flooded with an enormous amount of people, and the lines are wrapping around the blocks in many places. In addition to that, there was complaints in one location in Upper Manhattan where there were voting delays, reportedly because election officials could not find ballot cards and scanners were not working. In other parts of New York, where voters still do not have power or electricity, military trucks have been used as makeshift polling stations. In Staten Island, people were casting their ballots with a flashlight and using paper ballots. Now, I did mention New Jersey. Their government officials decided to allow voters to cast their ballot either by fax or by email. We are getting reports that volunteers say that they are now getting overwhelmed from the flood of emails coming in. There's an enormous amount of delay. Some voters in New Jersey can't even find their polling locations. But throughout the East Coast, there's been other complaints. For example, in Cleveland, Ohio, there's been reports of malfunctioning election scanners. In Florida, a lawsuit has already been filed over early voting suppression. And there's also reports coming out that hundreds of voters in Florida have received robocalls from a so-called elected official saying that the election is on Wednesday. Now, in Arizona, voters also received robocalls just a day ago directing Democratic voters to wrong polling locations. Meanwhile, in Oregon, there's been allegations of voter fraud and ballot tampering. And authorities in Texas and Iowa, this might be most surprising. According to reports, they have threatened international election monitors with arrest if those monitors approach voting locations anywhere in Iowa or Texas. So clearly, the integrity of the American election system is up to be challenged on this big election day in 2012.
And Guyana, plenty of tension, of course, on the two leading candidates. But what about the third-party contenders?
Bill, according to a Gallup poll, 40% of Americans identify themselves as independents. These are tens of millions of people who would have possibly voted for a party other than Republican or Democratic if they had the choice, but they don't. You do have alternative candidates in this election, but their voices have been blacked out by the U.S. mainstream media, which are entirely focused on the two-party race. We had a debate here in RT Studio just the other night between the two leading alternative candidates in this election, and they did offer views distinctly alternative to those of Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. We prepared a short clip of some of their remarks. Take a listen.
Higher corporate tax rates with
economic...
The notion that we've been the country that stood up to the bully as opposed to being the bully. It's a growing police state, quite obviously.
We can end the failed racist war on drugs, downsize the military, end the drone wars, bring the troops home.
Let's stop with our military interventions. Let's get out of Afghanistan tomorrow. 30,000 drones flying over the United States. What are they flying over the United States for?
End unemployment and jumpstart the green economy that spells an end to climate change and makes wars for oil obsolete.
Alternative candidates also talk about how difficult and expensive it is to get on the ballot in the U.S. Campaign financing is a huge issue here, especially with the Supreme Court ruling, which now allows corporations to funnel as much money as they want into political campaigns, which makes it virtually impossible for someone without the backing of the big party machines to win an election, because big money goes to the big parties. The election campaigns of Mitt Romney and Barack Obama have cost around $1 billion each, and none of those alternative candidates who were debating this Monday night could possibly catch up with that kind of spending. The amount of all the ads that we've seen in this election cycle has been staggering, so it's quite hopeless to be an independent in the U.S.
Guyana, thanks very much indeed. Well, more now on the vote from the perspective of Wes Benedict. He's Executive Director of the